Yo, YouTube, what is up? Welcome to the BK Lounge. It is Sunday, December 1st, 2019. Hopefully all of you had a great Thanksgiving, a great holiday weekend, some time off of work to spend with friends and family. I know I did. Hopefully y'all did the same. Lots to talk about, as you can see in the title of this video. What do we call this? Black Sunday? Right? I mean, Black Monday is the day after the NFL regular season when a bunch of coaches lose their jobs. So maybe this is Black Sunday for the Texas Longhorn football program. Major shakeup to this coaching staff. Some moves that were expected, some perhaps a little bit surprising. But the university announced today that, well, a lot of things. First off, the first news that came out was defensive coordinator Todd Orlando had been relieved of his duties. That's important because Todd Orlando was one of two assistant coaches on the staff that actually had more time left on his contract beyond this year. T.O. had another year on his current contract, so he was actually fired today. So that came out first, and then gradually over the course of the day, it was announced that, let me make sure I get these all right, that Drew Mehringer, the wide receivers coach, has been fired as well. Corby Meekins is no longer an assistant coach. He was sort of the co-wide receiver / tight end coach for this team. He's no longer an assistant. He's going to stay in an administrative capacity. Here's your news with Corby Meekins. And then Tim Beck, the offensive coordinator, has been reassigned. He will still be the quarterback coach for the University of Texas, at least for the time being, but he will no longer be the offensive coordinator for the Texas Longhorns moving forward. So, long story short, Texas is going to need two new coordinators for next season. I don't know how much of this news is very surprising to me. I mean, if you're a Texas Longhorn football fan, it's been discussed all year long whether or not Todd Orlando would be brought back as the defensive coordinator for this team. This defense has really struggled, 108th in the country in total defense. They miss more tackles than any team in college football. They're just poorly coached, poorly disciplined, and Todd Orlando didn't make nearly enough adjustments this year to suit his personnel. I know there was a lot of youth, I know there was some inexperience, I know there was a ton of injuries to this Texas defense. There's no doubt. And the Longhorns gave up a lot less points in the last month of the season when they finally started getting some guys back on the defensive side of the football. But, man, it's been speculated for a long time. This defense just hasn't been very good. Players were not developed. Todd Orlando wasn't coming up with a defensive scheme to suit his personnel, to suit his talent. And I don't think he gives a whole lot on the recruiting trail either. So Todd Orlando's gone. Some folks, and I'd speculated it here on this channel and on my radio show on the Horn in Austin, maybe Todd Orlando had done enough to save his job over the final month of the season. There was a possibility of that, considering this defense didn't give up 25 points in any of the final 4 games of the regular season, but this defense has been an issue all year long. We saw some signs at the end of last year that this defense was kind of falling apart, and then really since the LSU game way back in week 2, this defense has had some serious issues. And once again, Texas defensive coordinator only lasts 3 years. That's happened with the last 2. That happened with Vance Bedford when he was working with Charlie Strong. He got fired in the middle of year 3. And then, of course, Manny Diaz, who was let go in the middle of year 3 as well. So we're in a really bad cycle at the University of Texas with defensive coordinators not being able to last longer than 3 years. It's crazy, man. I mean, funny how things change, right? Year 1, Todd Orlando, this defense plays really, really well. And Longhorn fans are freaking out. Man, I hope no one takes Todd Orlando. I hope no one hires him away as a head coach. We got to keep this guy. We got to do whatever we can to make sure Todd Orlando remains the defensive coordinator at Texas. And then midway through year 3, everybody's ready to get rid of him. And obviously at the conclusion of year 3, not even. They still got a bowl game to play, of course. But the conclusion of the regular season in year 3, Todd Orlando is gone. And also the changes on the offensive side of the football, those may be a little bit more surprising to folks. Drew Mehringer, the wide receivers coach, for me, far and away the worst coach on this staff this year, and really for the last couple of years. The wide receivers have not developed at all. And inside sources and this stuff is starting to leak on Twitter and social media and all the insider sites. Got to give love to Orange Bloods and Horns 24/7 and Inside Texas. Everybody doing their job today. Subscribe to those sites. Support those dudes and ladies. They work hard, and obviously a big day for them today. But a lot of reports about Drew Mehringer saying that the players were going to revolt if he was still the wide receivers coach come Monday. Brian Davis of the Statesman tweeted that out. He said, "From what I can gather, if wide receiver coach Drew Mehringer had remained on the Texas staff as of 9 a.m. Monday, tomorrow, there would have been a serious internal revolt." There's been all kinds of behind-the-scenes reports of Drew Mehringer going against Tom Herman and talking bad about Tom Herman in public, which those things obviously can't happen. It's almost a miracle that Drew Mehringer lasted this long. But, man, the wide receivers were so poorly coached this year. Everybody outside of Devin Duvernay and Colin Johnson, who are seniors, mind you, was just not very good. And you could tell that they didn't really know what they were doing out there. And you could argue that Colin Johnson didn't really develop a whole lot either. I mean, this is a guy who had day one NFL draft potential. I know injuries kind of ruined his senior season this year, but man, it didn't feel like there was a whole lot of progression going on. And you combine that with the fact that, or at least the reports that Drew Mehringer was going out and talking bad about Tom Herman out in public, that's not acceptable. And let me see if I can find this exact report from Orange Bloods from Anwar Richardson a little bit earlier today so I can give you some information what I'm talking about. Here's the exact quote from the Sunday pulpit from Orange Bloods. "One position coach who is about to be removed backstabbed Herman on multiple occasions, according to my sources. That assistant developed a reputation for telling players in private where they were on the depth chart, but never stating things publicly during meetings. That led to a lot of confusion within that position room. In addition, when players complained about the program to that coach, instead of trying to bring clarity, he blamed Herman. That lack of loyalty eventually trickled back to Herman." And apparently that's not the worst story. More from Orange Bloods, more from the Sunday pulpit today. "From what I was told, when Herman invited former Rutgers coach Chris Ash to give his input prior to facing Oklahoma this year, that coach badmouthed Herman to his guest. And Herman heard about the comments, and apparently the assistant has been living on borrowed time in that moment." And lastly, the Orange Blood staff reports that players in that position room no longer wanted to play for that assistant, and they would enter the transfer portal if he was retained. The Orange Bloods report doesn't mention Drew Mehringer, but that's Drew Mehringer right there. I could tell you guys that right there. So, yeah, that was a disaster. That was an absolute disaster. So, no real surprise there. Just considering what we've heard, what I've heard behind the scenes over the last couple of weeks to months. And I did hear that, a lot of Texas wide receivers were considering entering the transfer portal if Mehringer was still the coach. Next year, hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully whoever the new coordinator, Tom Herman, the interim staff, whoever they bring in as the new offensive coordinator and wide receivers coach, hopefully they can talk some of these receivers off the ledge because, once again, Texas is already losing Devin Duvernay and Colin Johnson to graduation. You don't want to lose more of the guys that you have. Live chat is rolling right now, guys. I appreciate that. I will read some of those in a second. I do want to mention, though, that there's already some rumors, some speculation regarding who the new coordinators could be at the University of Texas. Offensive coordinator-wise, once again, Tim Beck reassigned, still the quarterback's coach for now. I don't know if that's going to be the case moving forward. I know a lot of Longhorn fans want Tim Beck to be the QB coach and let him keep working with Sam Mehringer, but I'm not sure Tim Beck's going to accept that type of role beyond this year. That guy's got some skins on the wall. I know he's not a great offensive coordinator, but he's good enough to get a job as an offensive coordinator somewhere else. I'm not sure he's going to be willing to stick around just as a quarterback's coach at the University of Texas. But that's the short-term plan. But we do know that he's been demoted. He's no longer the offensive coordinator at UT. And the two earliest names, according to multiple reports out there, are LSU's Joe Brady and USC's offensive coordinator, Graham Harrell. Yes, that Graham Harrell. LSU's offense is really good with Joe Brady. Joe Brady's not the offensive coordinator at LSU. He's the wide receivers coach / passing game coordinator, but they brought him in this year to kind of revamp that offense, and LSU's the number 2 team in the country. They've got the number 2 total offense, the number 2 scoring offense in college football. They're averaging nearly 50 points a game. They just put up a 50 spot on the Aggies last night, and Joe Brady has been highly praised. He's a Broyles Award semifinalist for top assistant coach in college football. Hell, Longhorn fans, we got to see it firsthand how good that LSU offense has been this year. And Joe Brady deserves a ton of credit for that. Only 30 years old, but he's one of the hottest names on the coaching market right now. He's not making a whole lot of money at LSU, and he's not the offensive coordinator, so maybe the potential to be an actual offensive coordinator at Texas could be intriguing to Joe Brady, but my guess is LSU's going to do whatever the hell they have to do to keep Joe Brady around. They've just had such a spectacular season, the best offensive year for LSU football in forever. They're not going to let that guy leave. They're going to pay him. I know Texas can pay, but my guess is they're going to pay Joe Brady, keep him there at LSU. They'll probably get rid of or demote or at least rename Steve Ensminger, who's the actual offensive coordinator for the Tigers, so they can give Joe Brady the title of offensive coordinator. That would be awesome. I would love Joe Brady. If you've watched LSU this year, I know they've got a great quarterback. Joe Burrow is going to win the Heisman, but hey, Texas has a great quarterback coming back next year too. I would love to see what Joe Brady could do with Sam Ehlinger. I don't want to ruin anything. I'm not hearing anything yet involving this Joe Brady news outside of that he is a top target for Texas. But my guess is LSU is going to do whatever they can to keep him, or Joe Brady will take like an offensive coordinator or probably a head coaching job. Someone's going to be crazy enough to maybe offer him a head coaching job. I think if he does leave, it would be something bigger than the OC at Texas, but we shall see. Graham Harrell, on the other hand, everyone remembers him, the Texas Tech quarterback, played in the NFL for a couple of years. He's been at USC as their offensive coordinator for the last 2 years. Apparently, he's interested as well. There's reports a couple hours ago out of California that said if Texas reached out, then Graham Harrell would definitely listen. Clay Helton may or may not have gotten fired today. What an S-storm that is in Southern California. But regardless, Graham Harrell could be interested. Of course, he's a Texas kid. Was the offensive coordinator at UNT before going to USC. So maybe there's some interest there. USC's offense, 18th in the country in total offense, and 37th in scoring offense at 33 points per game. But, man, they had quarterback injuries galore in Southern California. I think Graham Harrell's a great offensive mind, too, and he's only 34 years old. So if those, in fact, are the two top targets for Texas, two young guys, both younger than the age of 35, but two great names. I think Joe Brady would be my first choice, even though he's only been at the collegiate level as an co-offensive coordinator for 1 year. The proof is in the pudding, though. That guy has done phenomenal. But Graham Harrell, I think, would be a pretty good choice as well for Texas. Now, it's interesting because Tom Herman's an offensive guy, and this is Tom Herman's offense. How much is he going to be willing to take his foot off the gas and let whatever new offensive coordinator he brings in actually run the offense? Because Graham Harrell loves to throw the ball. He's an air raid guy. He loves to throw the football, and Tom Herman wants to run the football. Power spread type of guy. Sometimes to a fault, he wants to run the football. Same thing with Joe Brady. Obviously, LSU's been throwing the ball a lot this year, way more in years past. It's going to be tough to convince a big-name assistant to come here to work for a head coach who's kind of on the hot seat going into 2020 if you're not willing to give him full reign over the offense. So that's going to be fascinating. Whoever Texas brings in, whether it's Brady, Harrell, or somebody completely different, how much is Tom Herman willing to let that guy actually coordinate the offense? I've been talking about it for weeks to months. I would love Tom Herman to not call the plays anymore, even though I think he's a great offensive mind. He needs to focus on the other actual responsibilities that go into being a head coach, clock management, penalties, more discipline for this football team, special teams. Just details that have been falling through the cracks, especially this year at Texas. I think Tom Herman needs to spend more time focusing on that than calling the plays offensively. There's plenty of great coaches in college football and the NFL who don't call plays. Doesn't mean you're a bad coach. You got to do what it takes to be a head coach. Some guys can do it, call plays and be a head coach. Some guys, it might be a little bit too much for them. I think this year we learned that it might be a little bit too much for Tom Herman. Now, defensive coordinator-wise, only one name I've seen so far. It's about 7:15 on Sunday night. I'll try to get out of here before the Texans game starts so y'all can enjoy that. Only one potential replacement for Todd Orlando that I've seen so far, and that is the aforementioned Chris Ash, who was fired as the head coach at Rutgers. He was there for 3 years. Not very good. I mean, is anyone ever a good coach at Rutgers? But Chris Ash was the defensive coordinator at The Ohio State University for a couple of years before that. He's also coached at Iowa State, was a defensive assistant for Iowa State for a few years, about a decade and a half ago. He is a potential top candidate to replace Todd Orlando as the defensive coordinator. You know, I think Chris Ash is a really good head coach, but I always get scared when coaches hire their friends. And I mentioned it a few minutes ago. Tom Herman brought in Chris Ash to help game plan against Oklahoma. That didn't really work, although Texas defensively wasn't that bad in that game. But you get my point. I always get nervous when coaches bring in their friends. Once again, Chris Ash, I think, is qualified for this job, for a big-time defensive coordinator job. He was a DC at Ohio State. But, man, Tom Herman brought in a lot of his buddies from the University of Houston, and clearly that didn't work out because those guys are getting fired after just 3 years. So we'll see. That's the only name I've heard. If you guys have heard something, hit me with a live chat. But crazy day, crazy staff shakeup today. Black Sunday, if you will, for the Texas Longhorn football program. We knew changes were coming. We knew there was potential to be a massive overhaul with his coaching staff after the 7-5 season in year 3 for Tom Herman. And I'm a little bit surprised that the decisions were made today and came out today. They do make sense, though. National Signing Day, the early national signing period starts 17 days from now. So you've got to send your coaches out to recruit. I mean, that's what these coaches are going to do between now and the bowl game and now a National Signing Day. So you've got to make sure you have your puppies in order to go Bill Raftery and make sure you have the guys that you want to have going out and recruiting for you. Guys who are actually going to be here next year need to be the guys recruiting the class of 2020. Texas already did lose a commitment for the class of 2020 in Van Fillinger, the 3 to 4 star defensive end out of Utah. Been hearing reports that guy was considering decommitting for the last couple of months, so I don't think that news is too surprising, but he announced it via Twitter the same day that Texas fired Todd Orlando. So maybe some more attrition coming on the recruiting trail, maybe some attrition coming within the Texas program already. We might see some guys enter the transfer portal because of all of the coaching changes, but once again, this shouldn't come as too much of a surprise, some of these moves on the coaching staff, and maybe Tom Herman's not done. Maybe there's another move or two that will be made between now and the bowl game or after the bowl game concludes with this coaching staff. But Tom Herman's going to be here. We knew that. We weren't sure what assistants are going to be brought back. And now we know that Texas needs 2 coordinators. So it's going to be a crazy offseason here in Austin. All right, let's check some of the live chats, guys. Oh, a lot of y'all watching. Appreciate that. Hopefully everyone's having a good Sunday. If you're a Cowboys fan, you're actually having a pretty good Sunday, considering what happened on Thursday. How about the Miami Dolphins putting up 37 on Philly, the worst team in football, or the worst offense in football, beating the Eagles? What a gift. My God, nobody wants to win the NFC East this year, it feels like. Texans obviously getting it going here in a few minutes. All right, some comments. Mark says, why make the moves before the bowl season? Actually, just talked about it. Perfect timing. But, yeah, recruiting, National Signing Day, 17 days from now. You want to make sure you've got the guys that you are going to have on the staff moving forward out recruiting over the next couple of weeks. What up, BK? Says Speak Easy. What's going on, man? Or, oh, man, whoever you are. Apparently, Drew Mehringer was a snake and cancer in the locker room. Yeah, there would have been mutiny. I've been hearing reports about that over the last couple of weeks. That's a problem. And, man, just the lack of coaching, the lack of development. You could talk about it for the entire University of Texas football team, but especially at the wide receiver position, man. I figured even without Lil Jordan Humphrey that the wide receiver room would be maybe the deepest and most talented position unit that Texas had. That was clearly not the case, right? Outside of Duvernay, outside of Colin Johnson, nobody got better as the year progressed. Nobody really stepped up and became a consistent threat on the offense. You could say Brandon Eagles, but he had games where he wasn't there. Jake Smith caught a touchdown against Texas Tech, but I almost felt like he was in the doghouse for the majority of conference play. You know, Marcus Washington, Alvante Woodard, you didn't get a whole lot. Malcolm Epps, you didn't get a whole lot from those guys all year long. So it made sense. I mean, regardless of the snake that Drew Mehringer apparently was and is, he deserved to be fired on merit alone. Derek Wareheim. Will Derek Wareheim be released after the bowl game, says Bruce Wayne. Yeah, I don't know. Derek Wareheim is a guy that I'm surprised still has a job as of today, considering all of the other moves that Texas made. I know Tom Herman is very close with Derek Wareheim. I know they're good friends, so maybe Derek Wareheim's going to stay on staff because of that. He already had his role reduced from offensive line coach a couple of years ago to tight end / special teams coordinator, whatever the hell he is right now, when they brought Herb Hand in. Special teams sucked for Texas. One of the worst special teams, I think that makes sense, in all of college football. Yeah, I don't know. I got to do a little bit more digging. I'll try to let y'all know about Derek Wareheim. But if we're talking just pure merit, you could make a strong case that he should probably be fired as well. But maybe he'll stick around. Maybe he'll be one of the few guys who are brought back on this coaching staff for next year. Rick Robinson says, better make some big splash hires. Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, we've talked about it on these videos for the last couple of weeks. Tom Herman's legacy at the University of Texas is going to be defined by this offseason. This offseason, the changes he makes to his coaching staff are going to dictate whether or not Tom Herman is the guy to truly bring Texas football back. He's obviously made some moves today to fire some guys. Now he's got to go make the right hires. And Chris Del Conte, the athletic director at UT, he's going to give Herman an open checkbook. He's talked about it. He's publicly talked about how, hey, money's not really an issue here. We'll pay for it. We'll do what we have to do. So it's going to be Tom Herman's decision, but he'll kind of have his pick of the litter. He's going to have whatever amount of money it takes to hire whatever assistants he wants. So, yeah, this is on Tom Herman, and he's got to make some big name splash hires. And hell, I don't care how big of names they are. I just want them to turn this team around, have them figure it out a little bit. Let's see. Cynic Think says, can someone elaborate on the Mehringer debacle? That was a few minutes ago. I think I hit that. I think I got your question. Man, a lot of these. I'm scrolling through these. I should have probably checked these a little bit before. Kyle says, I think Orlando got himself canned. He can learn from this year, and I hope he does well. You can't blitz on 3rd and long from the secondary every time. Yeah, just Todd Orlando didn't adjust. He didn't adjust. It's as simple as that. I think he's a good defensive mind, but he didn't coach to his personnel. He's so set in his ways. He's so set in his schemes, the 3-man fronts, the ridiculous blitzes from all over the place, the 0 blitzes, and he wouldn't change. He wouldn't change. The team obviously needed it. They needed to make adjustments on defense, and it just didn't happen until way too late. The 108th ranked defense in college football this year, I think that says it all. I think that is your proof or your reasoning for why Todd Orlando was let go. Jose says, I wonder how much of Brew McCoy leaving Texas had to do with Mehringer. I don't know. Maybe some of it did. Brew McCoy, it's a name I haven't heard in a while. Do you think if Graham Harrell comes over as the offensive coordinator from USC, do you think Brew McCoy is going to come with him? Is that a possibility? Are we still talking about that guy? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question, Jose, but it is a good question. Man, Carl Reese, the longest tenured defensive coordinator since '98. He was here for 6 years. That is crazy. That is crazy to think about. All right, let's check. Plenty more of these. Hire Charlie Strong as defensive coordinator. He is available. Oh, how funny would that be for the other teams in the Big 12, not for Texas fans. Yeah, Charlie Strong got let go today, too. 4-8 at South Florida this year. That's a bummer because South Florida plays Texas, the first game of the 2020 season here in Austin. I still feel good about Texas winning that game, but I would have felt better if Charlie Strong was the head coach there. Man, that guy is just falling off. 3 years at Texas, only gets 3 years at South Florida as well. I don't think Texas is still paying him. Are we still paying that guy? I hope not. That did not work out very well whatsoever. Steve Adazio got fired at Boston College today, too. So it wasn't just Texas making some big-time moves, but Texas, the highest touted or most prestigious program, if you will, making some changes today. But, yeah, Steve Adazio, when you're losing games to Kansas by like 40 points, which is what Boston College did in the non-con, that probably means you are going to lose your job. Let's see. You think Ash will be able to stop Big 12 offenses? I don't know. We'll see if it is Chris Ash who's brought in. I am scared once again of the buddy system. That Tom Herman and Chris Ash are friends. once again, you're going to have an open checkbook. You're going to be able to go hire whoever the hell you want. You got to bring in the right guy, not just someone that you're friends with, not just someone that you're a little bit comfortable working with. Tom Herman tried that already once at UT, and it didn't work out. Those guys are getting fired. Chris Ash's defense was phenomenal when he was the defensive coordinator at Ohio State. Obviously a big-time conference. Was he on the national? Yeah, he was on the national championship staff, I believe. Let me think. Yeah, I think he was on the national championship staff when Ohio State won it in 2014. Of course, Tom Herman on that staff as the offensive coordinator as well. So, I mean, Ohio State has a good defense seemingly every year, even though they lose their defensive coordinator seemingly every year. But we'll see. Like I said, I think he's got some skins on the wall, but I don't know if he's the best name out there. You got to do what OU did. I know OU still had some defensive struggles this year, especially late in the season, but Alex Grinch was the biggest name out there. OU ponied up. They paid him a lot of money, and the Sooners' defense much improved. Not done yet. Still have some work to do, no doubt about it. But anyone who's watched Oklahoma over the last couple of years, and if you've watched the Sooners play this year, obviously that defense looked a whole hell of a lot better. Lincoln Riley had never worked with Alex Grinch before, but he was a big name. Obviously the right guy for the job, at least through year one. That's what you have to do if you are Tom Herman. Coach Boone might be available. Will Muschamp, we're going to get the whole gang back together. Huh? Muschamp as the DC and Charlie Strong as the linebackers coach. And hell, who else do we want? Can we get Dwayne Akina back, bring him to coach the DBs? Just get the whole gang back together, man. South Carolina 4-8. They got stomped by Clemson. Rivalry weekend in college football, it's Big Brother weekend. It's what it is. I mean, just about every Big Brother took care of business this weekend against their respective rivals. Conference championship week coming up next week. God, OU still has a shot to make the college football playoff, which is a bummer. I might ask y'all this. I'm going to do another video or two during the week. I'm about to wrap this one up. But, man, I mean, Oklahoma and Baylor both still have a shot to make the college football playoff. Because Alabama lost, I really think if Utah loses to Oregon in the Pac-12 championship game next weekend, the winner of Baylor-OU is probably getting in. Definitely if it's Oklahoma, but probably if it's Baylor too. I don't think they'd put like a 2-loss Bama or a 2-loss anybody else over 12-1 Baylor. If Baylor can beat OU and avenge its only loss from the regular season, so who are you rooting for in that game? Is it Baylor? Is it Oklahoma? Oh, my God. I guess we're all Utes fans. We're all fans of the running Utes this coming week. We'll wait and see where Texas is slated for a bowl game, by the way. Could be against North Carolina and Mac Brown. Speaking of getting the whole gang back together, that would be crazy. Could be against Navy, Mississippi State, A&M potentially. I highly doubt that's going to happen, but we'll see what happens there. All right, a couple more minutes, guys. Samples must be brought back. Rashad Samples, who's the wide receivers coach at SMU, doing a great job up there. Of course, he was on this Texas staff last year. I would love Rashad Samples to be brought back, man. I mean, look at SMU's offense this year. Of course, Shane Buechele leading the way. They were great, best offense in school history. Prochet is one of the best wide receivers in college football, leads the country in receptions, Biletnikoff semifinalist. Samples is a great guy, and a great coach, and a great recruiter as well. Done phenomenally well on the recruiting trail. Did at Texas and has done at SMU. Matter of fact, Quaydarius Davis, who recently decommitted from Texas, the wide receiver for 2021. A lot of people think he's leaning SMU because of Rashad Samples. So maybe if you bring in Samples, you get Quay Davis back, which would be a nice add to this offense, to this football team. Kyle says, I can't root for either team. Yeah, man, it's Baylor or Oklahoma, right? That's pick your poison there. I'm not one of those Big 12 guys. Like, I root for Texas, and y'all know I root for Kansas. I don't really root for the conference to succeed. Like, whenever Oklahoma makes the playoff, I don't want them to win because it, makes the conference look good. I hate them. I don't know. I was born a Longhorn. I can't root for Oklahoma, even when they're playing Alabama, even when they're playing somebody in a different conference, whatever. I'm not going to root for the Sooners, but I also feel that way about Baylor too. So I really don't know who we're rooting for on Saturday. Josh says, how will Graham do with dual threat quarterbacks? Speaking of Graham Harrell, I don't know. It's a good question. I'm trying to think of the quarterbacks that Graham Harrell has coached, whether it's at UNT. I mean, I think he was with Mason Fine for a year. Mason Fine's a little bit of a dual threat. He can run. USC had 3 or 4 different quarterbacks that played this year. That's interesting. Graham Harrell's more of an air raid type of guy, but Sam Ehlinger's legs are a weapon. You want that to be a part of the Texas offense for next year. And Tom Herman obviously likes dual threat quarterbacks as well. You look at the guys, you look at Casey Thompson, and you look at the guys that he's bringing in on the recruiting trail. Just about all of them are dual threat quarterbacks. So I'll have to look into that a little bit more, Josh. That is a very good question. I've got to do some more research on Graham Harrell and the job that he's done. He's only 34, only been an offensive coordinator for 4 or 5 years. Obviously, Joe Brady, the other candidate, or at least the other top target for Texas for the offensive coordinator position. He's only 30 years old, only been a college coach for 1 year. Jake says, what's up, Jake? My buddy Jake. Just here to let everyone know that Ash sucks. Wisconsin's defense got 10 times better as soon as he left. Love you, BK. Hook 'em horns. Yeah, Jake Cunningham. Good dude. Well, that's interesting. Jake, a big Wisconsin fan, watches every game, so he would know. That's interesting that I've said that word a lot. I'm sorry. But Wisconsin fans, at least, not happy with the job that Chris Ash did. And Ash was at Wisconsin before Ohio State. I think he went from Wisconsin, was fired there, then went to Arkansas for a year, then got the job at Ohio State before he became the head coach at Rutgers. It's a whole lot to work with there. But that's interesting. There's at least one negative vote for Chris Ash. So, all right. Matthew says, yeah, Graham Harrell was with Mason Fine for a couple of years. Big drop in UNT production this year. Definitely. They missed Graham Harrell. This was supposed to be a pretty good year for the Mean Green of North Texas. Mason Fine's senior year. He's one of the better quarterbacks in college football, even though most people probably don't know who he is. UNT's offense took a serious step back in 2019. And I know, I've seen this on Twitter. USC's offense, 37th in scoring, just 33 points per game, 18th in total offense. So people thinking maybe that's not a big enough splash higher. But, man, I think Graham Harrell's a great offensive mind. And in the Big 12, you got to go air raid, man. And I think that would work. I think Graham Harrell would work if he was the offensive coordinator at Texas. USC had a ton of injuries on offense, especially at the quarterback position, and he had to work with Clay Helton. Say what you will about Tom Herman. Jury's still out on him for a lot of people, but I'll take him over Clay Helton for sure. Graham Harrell was almost winning and putting up good offensive numbers in spite of USC's head coach, who may or may not be fired. I still can't quite figure that out. Matt says Westcott posting some quotes from Harrell regarding running game and his philosophy. If anyone is interested, okay, thanks, Matt. I will check that out for sure. All right, guys, I think that's going to do it. I'm trying to see if I've missed any of these comments. I appreciate all the love, man. A lot of viewers tonight, a lot of comments. Thank you guys, as always, for watching. Crazy day for the University of Texas, a day that a lot of folks expected. I wasn't sure it was going to be today, but we knew coaching changes were coming. And Texas now needs 2 coordinators. They made a lot of moves today, so we'll see what happens. We'll see who Tom Herman brings in to replace Tim Beck and Todd Orlando. Wearing the Sugar Bowl shirt. 1 year ago tomorrow, Texas was selected to play in the Sugar Bowl. Good times. Damn, I was hoping to go back to New Orleans for New Year's this year. That was a lot of fun last year. Now it'll either be Memphis or Orlando or Houston for Texas. We'll find out what bowl the Longhorns are in after next weekend. Of course, we have to wait for Conference Championship Week to play out to see where Texas falls. All right, guys, thanks as always for watching, man. Appreciate the love. Hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving, a great holiday weekend. I'll do a couple more of these videos this week for sure as more rumors start to come out regarding the coaching staff. We'll see if any more changes are made in terms of guys being fired, demoted, reassigned, whatever. Listen to the shows. Listen to all the shows on the Horn, but Midday with Trey and BK from 11 to 1 every weekday if you want more information. So, all right, guys, thanks as always. Appreciate the love. Until next time, y'all have a good night. Welcome.